Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Francis Fogel Story Strategist podcast, which gets more and more exciting at the same time as being more and more illuminating and educational, which arguably could translate to more and more overwhelming. But I really do hope it's not the case for anyone who is kind enough to be listening to this episode by episode, and rather it is a story of hope or an opportunity for us all to feel engaged in what I call the bigger picture system change manifestos that underpin our life's work. On that, I'm very happy to have a friend, a fellow sustainability obsessive, and a client, Lucy Vignola, who I've known for a number of years now. And who lives in France, who has an interesting personal story to tell, and is here today to talk to us about what it means to empower those who can empower others. She is a very experienced sustainability practitioner, as well as an expert in event production. And Lucy is going to be sharing with us where she is personally, and a little bit about what she's already brought to the world professionally and what she'd like to be spending her time doing more of moving forward. So thank you so much for being here, Lucy. Where exactly are you geographically so that people can picture you?
Southwest France, near to Bordeaux, which is I'm about an hour and a half east inland from Bordeaux. South enough for it to be nice and warm.
Thank you. We don't necessarily need to hear that over here in London. Shall we talk a little bit first about what you've done professionally for the last few years, let's say, and then maybe you can share with us where you are personally and sort of how your life has changed recently.
So I professionally started off in events 25 odd years ago, and was doing sort of managing events all over the world, and moving into like festivals and working with people particularly who were running sustainable events, as well as some other quite big events that weren't necessarily focused on that, but quite big sort of music festivals. And then I wanted to have kids, so I decided that I needed to retrain because doing events would take me traveling and away. So I retrained as a life coach, and did that for about 10 years while my little ones were growing up, working from home. And then got back into events because I really missed it, because I really love it. And I was working with a production company and for a particular client who then wanted to focus on making their global events more greener. And we worked on building this roadmap, and we kicked that off about a year ago now. So now I'm doing the same shows that I was working on as a production manager, but my focus is on making them green. So we're working on our greenhouse gas emissions, waste management, and basically working on each individual show to give them a bespoke like sustainability plan, if you like. So that's been my professionally. At the same time as that, I've been studying sustainability and permaculture since 2007, when I went to Findhorn Eco Village and did a month-long residential there on eco village design. Then went on to do the transition town training, and then my permaculture certificate with Bill Mollison in Australia. And since then have been sort of really focused on exploring all the ideas within that was really all about how humans exist on the planet, and how we can redesign how we live and work and coexist to be more harmonious, more human, more connected, and with less impact on the planet. So,
and for those of us who've been in this, and you've been deep diving into this a lot more than I have in the last 20 years, we need to remember that for a lot of people this is quite new information, or there's eco overwhelm and eco anxiety, which is very present today. And I think what we're working with is both the excitement of what can be done, as well as the awareness of how it must feel for everybody for whom this is almost the first utterings of what we need to do to change in society. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your family situation, your dad, and how things have changed. I wanted this podcast episode to be an opportunity for us to kind of celebrate him, and what he came to represent for you, and how that you feel his story has kind of flavored your sense of purpose. Would you tell us about that?
So my dad recently passed away about 6 weeks ago now, so all still quite new. Him and I were very close, and our lives were very closely intertwined for years. So he was running a restaurant as part of a little village pub in Hampshire from the year 2000, and it was next door to this pub. And in the end, the long story short is that we bought the pub and we decided to run it together as a business, my brother and I and my dad. And so we started this life as village publicans. And my brother went off to do some other work, and so it was my dad and I running it together for about 7, 8 years. And it was just this incredible experience of this gorgeous little village pub in the heart of a community. And what was interesting, I guess, it's, you don't realize what you've got until it's gone, and what was really clear, we left the pub and we went to live abroad. My dad went to Portugal for a while, and then in the end he came back to live near to me here in France. And then when COVID happened, and he was living in a little apartment, and he literally moved into this apartment, and 2 weeks later the first lockdown happened. He was living 5 minutes away from me, so I was going in to take his meals every day. And in France it was super strict, and you literally could go out one person at a time. You were only allowed out for an hour. You had to fill in this paper, and the gendarmes would be everywhere to kind of check that your paper and what time you left the house and stuff. So he was pretty isolated. I was, with my kids and partner at the time in the house, but, just sort of trying to kind of, bring things to my dad. But in the end, he was kind of by himself. And so when the second lockdown came, he came to stay at my house, which was, sort of 10 minutes away. And in the end, never left. We just decided that actually there was space in the house for him to live. And he had his own sort of separate studio, and it all worked great. Lower living costs for him. Plus him, he was getting older at the time, but then he was, he was with us. He was with the family, and that was 3 years ago. And so he had been living with me when he died, and what was really interesting was that, and it's one of the things that I realized after I left that I miss hugely, is my community. And when he died, we had this little group of close friends of his and mine back from the UK, and they were, when we knew we knew he was only had a couple of days left, and I was putting these messages into the group, and I was just letting everyone know what was happening. And it was a way for them, me to feel connected with them, but also for them to be part of the process. Because if we had been in the UK and we'd been in our community, we'd have all been together. You know, the pub was this sort of central point where everybody gathered, and we used to have, you know, village parties and celebrations and hanging out, but also when things happened and when people died in the community, the people would come to the pub, and they would come, and it would be the place where people would just come and be together. You know, the night that people would hear such awful news, they would all friends and everybody would come and gather, and just for a place to be together. And so when he was passing, I put this message in, and I just said to everybody, you know, think about him tonight, and you know, light a candle if you want, just have him in your thoughts, and help him on his way, all of us together. And so, you know, I realized how, you know, it's funny, at the time when we were living there, it used to drive me nuts being in this very close environment with people who knew my every move. Everybody knew everybody's business. Everybody, you know, everybody seemed involved with everybody's stuff all the time. And at the time, it used to drive me crazy. And yet, what I realize, and I'm realizing more, is that, and it was something someone else said, and I think it was in Chris Kenworthy said it in Anya's happiness summit, Unlocking Happiness Summit. And it was to do with the fact that community is, and connection and vulnerability, and actually the beauty of that close community is the vulnerability. And the whole point of the vulnerability is to be able to, when you have your life shared with people, like, that's life shared, and that's what community is. And it's that capacity to be vulnerable, to have your stuff kind of exposed and stuff out there, and for it to not matter, because actually that's the whole point of community, is that connection and support. And I'm realizing that now, having been away from it for so long, and having been able to have this, you know, the one of the strongest feelings I had when we had to do the funeral very quickly in France. You have to do it in 6 days. And I was so angry and brokenhearted that his friends couldn't be here, that they couldn't come and gather and say goodbye. People who had known him for like 20, 30 years, some more. Basically, we started the pub near to the village where I grew up. So we'd grown up in this village in Hampshire. We'd all moved away, and then we came back to do the pub, you know, 30 odd years later. And so there were people in that community who'd known my dad, you know, all my life. And yeah, it was one of the strongest feelings. I remember having to put together this funeral, and that none of his friends could be there. And I was like, this is the community, you know. And I went back to the UK a couple of days after the funeral, and we decided to go and have a drinks at the pub, and just say, you know, put a little message on Facebook and said, you know, if anyone wants to come. And it would be the first time that anyone had seen me since he'd gone, and it was the first sort of connection, you know. And I was a bit apprehensive, and I was like, okay, you know, I wasn't sure if I was quite ready. But we went there and we arrived, and it was just amazing how many people were there, like old friends that showed up. This woman showed up. She said, "You won't remember me, but I used to go to I remember going to dinner parties at your house with your mum and dad when you were really little." and just wanted to say how sorry I am. You know, it was just like people all came together as you would in a community when someone who's very much part of it is gone.
Mm.
Um, so that has been a huge gift and realization, and actually this whole theme of community has been circling for me in the last couple of years, because you know my choice to come out to live in France was I wanted to live at quite a slower pace. I wanted my kids to be bilingual. It was an opportunity. I was working for a job that I could work remotely. We'd spent a lot of time in France and Italy when we were kids. My dad's Italian. And I just took the opportunity, and actually took the opportunity at the time. And it was a year before Brexit, and it was amazing timing. And we ended up settling here. And the choice to come was the right one. And I'm happy that we came. You know, we live in a lovely house in the middle of the countryside, and definitely have a much slower pace of life and much more spaciousness in my life to be able to, you know, do creative stuff and explore all these ideas that we're talking about. But the one thing that I really missed, and I didn't realize really for a couple of years what it was, but you know, I realized it was community. We just don't have it in the same way for lots of different reasons. You know, French people gather in a different way. We don't have old friends here, and so yeah, so it's been a big theme. It's been a big theme, but it's also a theme that I see unfolding around me. And whether that's because that's I don't know what they call it, you know, when your ideas are kind of circulating, so you end up just sort of being in that sphere of connecting to the same ideas. So it might not be happening globally, but in my world it's happening globally. But all around how the importance of reinforcing community and making our communities resilient, and talking through the ideas of what that means, and you know, what does community give us, and what are the benefits of a cohesive community. So it's been really interesting that theme has been playing out in my sort of personal studies, at the same time as having it really reinforced to me through this process with my dad. So yeah.
I think the reason why I wanted also to have you on the show was to give people a sense, without, as I say, wanting to cause anyone any sort of unnecessary pain or feelings of overwhelm. What I wanted was to really, I suppose, drive home a message of there being the need, as you've actually said, to sort of appreciate things before they've gone. And you were talking, I think, about the pub, but of course, this is about a kind of mortality check for appreciating one's own life and also those of the people that we love before they've gone. But I think also what you and I are in the business of trying to do is to do as much as we can before we're gone for the planet, and try to get people to see for real what it is that we need to do at the moment, and to empower people to feel excited and qualified to make a change wherever they're at and from their point of reference. There is actually a word for your point of reference, which, in terms of what you're talking about, and I'm kicking myself because I just read it, I think in a book by Alistair Humphreys, called Local, which I'm currently reading, and I think he actually gives the official word for, and I'll look it up and send it to you, what it is when you've just become aware of something and then suddenly you start seeing it everywhere. And there is actually a word, can't remember what it is, but anyway, speaking of points of reference, yeah, how can leaders of organizations or individuals working in a particular context already redesign their lives so that they can do something that's both incredibly satisfying on a personal level and also leaves a sort of better footprint for those to come. And you talked to me earlier about the concept of design for sustainability, and we've also been talking about giving people who are in a position of power the opportunity to design their context so that they can empower others. And I wondered if you could turn to that now and sort of talk about the kinds of environments that you find yourself in that you can best serve yourself, what it is that you do for people, and what it is you'd like to see, and how you think design for sustainability works.
So the word that comes to me is holistic. And actually the challenge, it's the challenge that's in front of us. The solution to the challenges in front of us is a holistic, all connected, all system, all connected approach. Because
I suggest also integrated, which is a word.
Integrated, great word.
Yeah, somebody just shared with me earlier actually about.
And
yeah,
integrated, intentional design, speaking to the intentionality of the process. We have in front of us what's going on in the planet. We have in front of us, it's not just, let's call it what's going on the planet, but actually it's what's going on in society, in our systems of how we live, our this narrative of what is success, this narrative of what what we're reaching for, all of which I think are now outdated, as we have heard and talked about with, like, John Alexander's book, for example, speaks to that. Dougald Hines' book speaks to that. At Work in the Ruins, also another good one. And how we are now in this moment of being given an opportunity to explore a new story and a new narrative that fits better and that feels better. And the one thing I want to say and implore people is that there's no panic. It's not a panic. It's not. Yes, there are urgent situations to do with climate change itself, and the 1.5 degrees is now going to be 3 degrees, and what does that actually mean? And yes, in practical terms, that means an adaptation of how we live. But in that adaptation is an opportunity for us to examine the foundations upon which we've built our lives and what all of those foundations look like, and really being curious about each of those foundations and how they serve us. And also, this is an incremental process. It's not something that we can change overnight, but we can have an intention to pay attention to all of the elements, to know that they are all important, they are all interconnected. And so if we look at the foundations of work, for example, work being the main thing that we all are driven to do, and you can get into the deeper conversation about why we have to work and what compels us to work, or creating a life in debt, which means that we have to work to a level to pay all that stuff off. But the fundamentals of it is we go out to work and we are you know, I don't know what the statistics are, but generally what I see around me is I see most people striving to want to do something else that really fulfills their heart and soul, because actually what they're doing doesn't. And you know, how we feel about what we're going out to do every day and getting up every day, you know, all the memes that you see about, oh my God, it's Sunday, tomorrow's Monday, you know, how am I going to get through the week kind of thing. For me, that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that the majority of our global north population is stressed about having to go out and do the thing that actually they spend most of their life doing. So there is an opportunity for us to shift the narrative and shift our perspective on what work means and why we're doing it, but also what are we actually fulfilling through our work. I am a problem solver. That's why I love doing events, because I love fixing things. And so I look at this stuff and I think, okay, so how could we fix the work thing? And for me, you know, where I came to in this last sort of few months working with you more closely, was realizing that so the trend is to want to go and find your purpose, right? The trend is to want to go and fulfill your life's purpose. But actually, who's got time to go out and find their life's purpose when really you're just fighting to get the bills paid and to get through your week and to get home in time to spend some quality time with the family, to then, you know, keep working to save some money to try and take you away for a little break if you can. But generally, most people are, you know, less and less being able to afford even that. Life is expensive. And so it's all very well to be, you know, trying to kind of fulfill this dream of like, oh, what's my purpose? When actually I can't even think about that right now. Not even, you know, side hustles and all of that trend. And so what I've been looking at, and especially this year working on this sustainability within this organization, we did a workshop on the, you know, how to weave sustainability into the organization. And what was lovely about this workshop was that it was giving people the opportunity to look at all of the sustainable development goals. And the idea is like, you know what, guys, there's 17 sustainable development goals here. And it's not just climate change.
Will you just explain to those listening who are not aware of what the 17, you don't need to
go into
detail what
detail.
17 are, but what Lucy's talking about, just for those of you who are new to all this, is the
UN Sustainable Development Goals, yeah.
And these 17.
Are
so they're nice, 17. Easy to understand. 17 goals for things that we can all do better at.
And they're very, very simple, and they're basically, the premise is that if we are working towards one of those goals, if each of us is working towards one of those goals, these are goals that we want that to be achieved. Sustainability is actually a very narrow term for all of it, because they encompass social justice, they encompass equality for women, equal pay, they encompass climate change, clean water, but it's also clean oceans, it's, you know, responsible fishing. It's like an overall
what would good look like?
Human planetary stewardship. Like,
nice.
if we are all behaving as humans, taking care of each other and the planet as humanity, this is a sort of compact for the way forward.
And what I love about where we're at, because whilst you're the eternal fixer, I'm the eternal optimist, I'm actually excited because we find ourselves, you and I, and those of us in this world who've been thinking about some of this stuff for a while, and we're I'm certainly by no stretch the imagination an expert at all. I've just been on the periphery of, for example, corporate responsibility and marketing for good. We can come in at this point, I'm excited to say, and say it is overwhelming sometimes and it can be a bit scary, but as Lucy says, you don't need to panic, because what is really exciting is that we've got a lot of really good tools, a lot of data, and some really clear narrative as to what we can collectively come together, agree on, and work forward with. And some of us are in a position where we're not panicking, and we're going to hold space, and we're going to design workshops, and we're going to help you with your strategies, and we're going to do it in a cost-effective way so that you're not having to put loads of budget to this. Because I think a lot of what we're in the business of trying to do is serve people meet them where they are, and that includes financially, so that everybody can feel like they've got some agency or a sense of significance.
That's the thing.
This time.
Is the sense of agency, the sense of contribution, and the feeling. What's so exciting about this moment is that actually now there's some language being put to what's been felt. So this sense of disconnection, this dissonance, this sense of, I'm doing everything that I was supposed to do. I followed the path, I went to uni, I got my degree, I got the job, I got the car, I got the house, I've got the life. I still feel like something's off. What is that? And that's what, right now, this is now having language put to all of that, which is that for me, what I see is this sense of, the theme through all of this, wanting to find one's purpose and wanting to have meaningful work. Actually, what it speaks to is it speaks to this very natural human drive of contribution, collaboration, and helping others. And I think that this narrative that we've been under of humans are competitive and selfish, can I swear?
Of course, fucking swear.
It's bullshit. It's utter bullshit. It's a lie. And we don't have to live with that being true.
But
we can change the story. No. It's not.
It's not like
this isn't about
manipulatively.
It's a natural. We've been in a natural.
Just all been,
we've been in a natural flow.
Yeah.
Where life has gone, this natural wanting to rebuild the world after the world wars, and productivity and but
I think there's those who are scared, and then there's those of us who. So I'm sorry to say that I do my theory on. So we are March 2024 at time of recording, and perhaps being the daughter of a psychotherapist has kind of pushed me towards this view. But I can't help but think that there are, and I'm afraid to say, largely men who, because they're overwhelmed, because eco-anxiety and just the sense of unknown and a lack of agency and a lack of meaning, and just not quite sure what's around the corner, have not known how else to feel control, have picked up guns, and that's why we are where we are. And then there's those of us, men and women, who think that there's another way to do things. So sorry, I got a bit sidetracked there.
But this is also part of this, to not get too woo-woo about it. I think that the moment in time that we're in and the opportunity that we have as humanity is that we're in a transition. We're in a big transition, and these next 20 years are going to be a really, really interesting time.
Exciting, opportune. Don't need to be overwhelming, but could be overwhelming, and that's okay, because we're all human, and someone's got to, it's no one's fault, right? It's
there's one of the biggest things that we all need to cultivate is compassion for each other, compassion for ourselves. There's no blame for anything of where we are. It's been a very natural part of the process.
But even actually, that healing on there's a lot. You and I have been in the world of this like self-work, right, for a couple of
Mm-hmm.
years as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't agree with you more that I think the underlying themes are about, we talk about connection, and talk about purpose, but I feel almost it's been, I think people have been trying to drive personal purpose starting from themselves, as opposed to looking at society, looking at community,
That's exactly
finding
it.
a purpose. And then
Yeah.
it turns out the
Yeah.
byproduct of that is that
Yeah.
you as an individual are very much served by
That's
that work.
exactly what I've been talking about, and exactly what I've been trying to articulate in this writing, that I'm trying to get it out and form the words for it. But we're looking in the wrong place. This whole thing of like, I want to find my happiness, what's going to make me happy. Actually, happiness lies in being of service.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our natural way of humaning. And if we all work to be of service in some way, that in itself will bring us our happiness. So
and let's
instead
talk
of
about the
looking for
practical being of service thing. Let's just for a minute put our business hats on.
Yeah.
Think about how, it's a win-win situation, isn't it? There's no, you know what's really interesting? This is a whole other conversation, but I've been thinking about zero-sum economy philosophy. So a kind of post-Marxist idea is that there is a zero-sum economy where if somebody's winning and somebody's losing, so capitalism is bad because someone has got things and therefore another person doesn't have things.
Sure.
And capitalism would argue that actually no, it's not a zero-sum economy, and clever design would be that you do not need to compromise. Of course, the education is what you need, around what you actually need, because people will think that they're compromising if their understanding of luxury and what they need is something that is then needing to be reduced in order to serve. So talking about businesses, talking about how people can win and win, how have you seen it look like? You've been working with this events company and you've been helping them. How has that worked actually for their marketing, for their people, for their clients, for their business?
We're just in the beginnings. But what I see evolving is that in creating the opportunity through these workshops, through this kind of program, if you like, let's call it sustainability program, in waking people up to the opportunities to have a positive impact via the sustainability development goals in their community locally, the opportunity is to wake people up to that capacity to make a difference. And it's waking people up to that sense of agency, to that sense of purpose. And it's creating meaning right where they are. So let's just simplify it. Workforce is coming into work. They desperately want to go and find their purpose, but they haven't got time to find their purpose because they're working at their job. Team owners, company owners want their workforce to be happy and productive. Of course they do. We want happy people. We don't want massive staff turnover. We don't want burnout. But how do we solve that? What do we, okay, so we give them a, bit of a stipend to go on an away day once a week. The point is to actually enable people and empower people to design purpose in. Because if people are able to have meaning and purpose from right where they are, they don't need to go out there and look for their purpose and find their thing. They've got it right where they are. You end up having happier teams because they're actually connected to something that's meaningful. And that's can be anything from, and the whole point of it, of working directly with companies, is to help them design their own programs exactly where they are, right where they are in their community. If you're selling photocopiers from your industrial estate in Milton Keynes, there's differences that you can make, whether that's a local river cleanup or whether that's a local apprenticeship scheme, training scheme for for young people who want to learn sales or want to learn, you know, how to build photocopiers. I don't know. But the point is that the program gets designed and it's bespoke, and people are having a direct impact with something that's happening right where they are. And so you know, then they feel that they have agency, they feel like they're contributing, they feel like there's something meaningful, right? And it's, you know, let's imagine, again, I don't know the science, but for me it makes sense that would reduce stress, that would make for happier people, that would make people that they're feeling like they're making a contribution.
I'm thinking about being a mother and how for children it's you know, is it happiness or is it a sense of containment? And what we're looking for our children is that sense of safety and clear boundaries
and contentment as well. The word happiness really doesn't sit well with me, because we can't always be happy.
It's kind of a clarity of direct. It's like I'm satisfied about what I am supposed to be doing today, and you know, I have some food,
feeling content,
and like everything feels safe, you know.
And at the end of the day, that I feel empowered, that not only am I feeling that I have meaning in my everyday, but also I'm connecting to my community. And that's the point.
Yeah, I belong here. And
I belong
out there as well. And I can
contributing.
bridge this to that. And yes, I can come out of my home where I feel safe, and I can go out and play knowing that, you know, the way I'm playing is safe because I've been allowed to go out and I've been taught these skills, and you know, I'm socially comfortable enough that I can leave my mother and go, and you know, all these things when you become a parent, you know, that they don't tell you about becoming a parent are very interesting in the world of business, because you can't help but, you know, I've learned so much about myself and how I relate to leaders well and not so well sometimes, and how that compares to being a parent. And yes, the power to empower, as you say, is very much what it is to be a good parent and to set your child out in the world with a sense of confidence and clarity about what they can do, how they can play, and how it's okay if it's not perfect, and all these things, and how to cope with pain when it doesn't quite work out, things like that.
I think also the important thing, the sort of central thing in all of this is values, and understanding our values. And our values, the things that are important to us, are a very central focal point to where we sit today with the state of the world. Because what we have decided is important is not necessarily our truest in our heart values. They're values that have been imposed on us by our societies, or by the stories that we've lived under, or you know, just by how we've lived. And so the work to start evolving our values and shifting those things that we feel are important to us comes from that awareness. And by doing this work with individuals as well as with companies, is that it's like a process of a domino effect of, if people wake up to what's important to them and they start to have agency in line with what's important to them, connecting them to the SDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals, but also just in general, just being part of the community, but making a difference in a way that also feels meaningful to them. This is waking up something of an awareness of like, wow, that's I value that, that's important to me. It's not just that I value that I've, you know, valuing material things, but actually I realize that I value other things too.
And you can still gamify the 17 things in a way that feels luxurious, fun. I'm not religious, but I have almost become religious about sustainability, because I feel the shackles of the weight of something that was just materialistic have been rather lifted. Not to say that I don't need things, but to then be able to find a thing which I know makes more sense. And there's a lot out there, there's a lot of resources that will help us to make decisions as individuals, as consumers, as business leaders, for what might make more sense. And then to be proud, and not only to prove to our employees and customers that we're trying our best, but to try to shift the dial ourselves and become the custodians of, frankly, good news. I'm starting to sound quite evangelical. And it is our responsibility as, you know, communicators of good news. So there is something about this, and I do think it comes back to this kind of sense in the human nature to share good and to share hope, and to be there at the point of pain when people don't know what to do, don't know where to turn, don't know, you know, there's some really great resources, which might shock you slightly, but it's better to be in the know than not at all.
I agree.
So you know, and just to be clear, the way that Lucy and I work is slightly different. So, you know, I might go into an organization and sort of help people to come up with a story that laughing, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you'll know by now that I do not know how to permanently switch off my artificial intelligent Zoom and its ability to dictate my gesticulations to interpret and then to show them. So yeah, that was a thumbs up from Zoom, thanks for that. Yeah, so I might go in and help a leader to articulate a clear story, and then to have that underpin strategies and communications across 4 different things: marketing and comms, employee engagement, customer loyalty, and community care. But I have people around me who are like, what was I going to call you before? Like, get shit done, like magicians, basically. They're actually really good at putting things in place and implementing. And, you know, I don't know if that's how you'd like to be described in terms of like an action monger.
Action monger's good.
But
I recently updated my LinkedIn and I called myself a project driver.
Yeah, exactly. And you and I were talking before about another interpretation of the Great Depression, which you said was the Great Simplification, which is, I think, a term that an author that you're reading,
Nate Hagens, he's a podcaster and writer that I follow. Used to be working in Wall Street in energy and money, and has since evolved his work and is now he's got a brilliant podcast with some really, really interesting, heavy-hitting guests. I definitely recommend a listen.
And it's an optimistic twist on depression, in that the greatness of it is indicative of a massive change, and yet, you know, for I think everybody, the concept of simplification is going to be a lot more gratifying than depression. And whether, you know, it is the case that we are going to have to simplify. You know, you were telling me about this concept of the economics of the whole thing, and that there isn't enough energy for the amount of energy
the money,
that's been sold
the debt
on the market,
that's in the system. Yeah.
And so it's just
he explains it much better than me. I really recommend. Yeah,
exactly. But there's a distillation, there's a reduction of, there's just not enough in the world, and so we're going to have to cope, #enjoy a simpler life, basically. And actually what that will bring with it, a simplification of strategy, a simplification of story, a simplification of resources, not needing so much. I'm watching this great program on BBC at the moment with Stacey Solomon, of all people. It's called Sort Your Life Out, and they take everything from you know, people who've just let their home, or not let their home has become completely overwhelming, and they've become, you know, they've hoarded and everything is
hoarding,
but it's not their fault. It's, you know, all these people have got the most extraordinary and complex situations, and have done amazing things, like taking their family members after their mum has passed away from COVID, and, you know, just amazing stuff. And they take everything out of their home, they put it all in a warehouse, they have to reduce it by half, they don't throw anything away, it's all sell, recycle, or donate. And then they just sort out their whole house and put it all back in. And there's something really, well, half of it back in, and in a really beautiful order and labeled and everything. And it's just super satisfying. But there's something, I'm reading another book at the moment about rituals around energy cleansing. And just the very act of simplification is just so rewarding on a personal level, just to speak to what we were talking about earlier, that I think people, as you say, are missing a trick and starting at the wrong place, when they could be thinking about the planet first and getting a fuck lot out of it on a personal level, as a side kind of product.
Yeah, and let's not forget, I mean, I know that COVID had a very serious effect on a lot of people, and there's nothing taking away from how awful it was for so many people. And at the same time, many, many, many people had a big adjustment at that moment and suddenly realized, like, wow, I can have a simpler life and it feels so much better. And this, this process of simplification, like I said, it's a process, but there is a way to bring more of that sense of contentment and meaningfulness into the everyday now. And when we look at what's going on in the planet, we look at what's going on in the world, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed, and it's very easy to have this sort of paralysis. And I get it. And to speak to that, first of all, there's lots of people doing amazing work all over the world for lots of causes. And in order for us to feel like we want to have a contribution, there are many ways to make a contribution. But the point is, it's that contribution. If we're all doing something to contribute a bit, and this goes beyond recycling, because we all know that it's all well and good that we all do our recycling, and that's great, but it's not quite enough, and we all know it's not quite enough, but we're not quite sure what to do else. But this way of looking at one's values, looking at the work we do, looking at the community that you've got around you, working out what's needed. Just ask the question, what's needed right here, right where I am, right where I'm working or having an impact, and how can I contribute? Whether that's
and having some guides, having people around who you don't have to do it all on your own. There's plenty of us coming out the woodwork who are arguably empathetic, authoritative, and have a story enough that can hopefully help you feel safe with us by your side, trying to get things to move forward without you having to compromise your businesses and your personal needs.
It's complementary. It's not, the idea is it's not bringing in some bells and whistles, really expensive program of consultancy. It's not. This is just simply about empowering teams, working closely to find out where there is work and projects and contribution that matches the values of the people that you're working with. And it's that connection between the values and the contribution that creates a sense of agency.
And getting people in to help you who are able to. My issue is with the word vulnerable and authentic. I don't know what it is. Like, somebody I heard talking the other day was offering honest, which I quite liked. But it's around clarity of and just openness to say, I'm doing this work because. So for example, I just want to finish off, Lucy, by making sure everyone's aware that were you to go in and work in an organization, you're quite clear, aren't you, about what you would do with the money if you earned it. So Lucy would love to, if you don't mind me saying, like,
please,
you want to go one step. She's very qualified, but she'd like to just continue with her education around this space and do an MA in design for sustainability. And Lucy would also love to potentially organize her own event. And so anything that Lucy gets paid to do is going to have another knock-on effect of her getting even more qualified to do this work, to actually give birth to a thing that's going to serve the universe. And it's so nice to be able to articulate what one is going to do with one's own takeaway financially and energetically from a situation, and to be able to go in there and pitch yourself as being experienced and knowledgeable, able and available, and also to be able to say what would happen for you in your life if that works out for you, right?
It's getting paid not just to do the work, but actually it's funding the onward continuing progression of this work and my contribution.
There's something about that phrase you and I have been gifted by the communities that we've been in, which is to get paid to be me. I think we could come up with the equivalent, you know, this can now be iterated into get paid to, and then it's the continue to serve bit or something like that, the pay it forward, but without it feeling like a sort of act of charity, but just a really pertinent business move to invest in people and come in and give you a bit and then just go off and do more with that, you know, and to be able to articulate that, there's something very beautiful.
What's that? The saying, are you prepared to plant the seed of the tree under whose shade you will never rest?
Or you'll end up resting. Oh yes, no, you'll never rest. Yeah. Or rest, in fact. I think the point is that, you know, gone are the days where we think we're only investing in shade that we're not going to sit under. And, you know, the reality is we are going to bloody sit under some shade. So we have to do this. It's not just a nice to have anymore. So it's a really
and also that
move.
What it speaks to is that the work is it's a longevity of the work. It's not, you know, we're not in this situation of solutions and fixes and it's all going to be all right in a few months' time. This is actually
this is
an
your
evolution of how, and all of us, like a change in how we're working and shifting from consuming to contributing, and how we design that into everything that we're doing, because that's in fact the change that needs to happen. But it's a, you know, it's going to take time.
And it also is very acceptable on a cultural level, though, because, you know, everyone's so used to saving for the future and the idea of it's completely gone, having a pension, and you know, putting money aside for your grandchildren, etc. And yes, there is a concept of dying with nothing, and I totally get that. And I think this kind of falls into this sense of giving away and not hoarding. But at the same time, the concept of being able to, I mean, certainly the founders and leaders that I like to work with are those that are very open about the fact that they would rather like to step away, but they definitely don't want to do that without a legacy plan that leaves their employees and their customers and their communities feeling really clear and safe about what it is that they're leaving behind. And also so that they can die feeling that the people who are taking over from them understand what it is that they created and what they would like to see. And so legacy, I think, is a really important thing to consider as an individual in the workplace today. Yeah. Thanks, Lucy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And I'm really pleased to say that we're segueing beautifully from sustainability into feeling significant at work. My next episode after Lucy will be an interview I've actually already done with my friend Josh Allen Dijkstra, who is the human-centric people ops expert and future of work guru by his own admission, and a TEDx speaker. And his hashtag that he's coined is love work. And he says love work is a revolutionary new approach to culture and people development. And there's just a few of us out there trying to help people feel more seen, heard and understood, more significant, and to have more fun along the way while they do something good for the planet. So keep listening, and we move from sustainability into people engagement. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Lucy, again.
Bye. Thank you.